Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Good evening, race fans. Once again, it's another off week, at least for our radio show. We are back on the air tonight. It is Lugnuts and Horsepower. We have a lot to get into tonight after coming out of Indianapolis and heading to Pocono. Lots of big stories to go. I am your host tonight, Dustin Parks, here in a nice sunny Pennsylvania. Feels pretty good. Let me first say hello to my usual co-host, Rob Blount, who's in California, I believe. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, but I am on the exact opposite coast of California. I'm on Long Island.
Oh, really? Last time we were on the air, you were in California, so anything's possible. But also tonight, for his monthly dose of IndyCar action, we all know him on Twitter as GL2488. How about Glenn Locke back on the air? How you doing tonight, Glenn?
Oh, awesome. It's hot as hell right now in Riverside, California, but it's going to get cooler the next couple of days. Oh, it's going to be beautiful.
Absolutely. You can't complain about that. Cooler weather. We definitely have a lot to get into tonight. IndyCar, NHRA, obviously NASCAR. Lots to go in. So let's go ahead and do sort of the table of contents. We call it our racing roundup. Rob Blount, you have the floor.
All right. Well, to start us off, the IZOD IndyCar Series qualified for the, give me 1 second here, for the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio. Will Power won the pole. Dario Franchitti qualified second. Simon Pagenaud, Alex Tagliani got fifth and ran out the top five. However, Tagliani will start 14th for a 10-spot grid penalty. Elliott Sadler, qualified 13th, will also start 23rd for a grid penalty as well. Moving to NASCAR, the Sprint Cup Series qualified this morning for tomorrow's Pennsylvania 400 from Pocono Raceway. Juan Pablo Montoya won the pole. Denny Hamlin qualified second. Coleman on third. Casey came fourth. Mark Ambrose ran at the top five. The NASCAR Nationwide Series races tonight at the Iowa Speedway in Newton, Iowa. Elliott Sadler won the pole for that. Darrell Wallace Jr., making, I believe, only his second career Nationwide Series start, will start second. Austin Dillon third. Jason Leffler fourth, and Justin Allgaier fifth. The Camping World Truck Series raced today already from Pocono Raceway. Joey Coulter got his first Truck Series win. James Buescher finished second. Nelson Piquet third. Matt Crafton fourth, and Denny Hamlin fifth. The NASCAR Well and Modified Tour was in action last night at Stafford Motor Speedway. Doug Covey got the win again. Jimmy Blewett finished second. Todd Zegedy third. Eric Beers fourth, and Ted Christopher finished sixth. Ryan Preece, who was attempting to run 5 races in 5 days, finished sixth last night at Stafford, and he is down in at Bowman Gray Stadium in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for tonight's Southern Modified Tour. Qualifying just ended there. Burt Myers won the pole for that race. George Bruenholz was third, qualified second. Brown qualified third. Burt's brother Jason Myers qualified fourth, and aforementioned Ryan Preece qualified fifth. The K&N Series was in action last night at Iowa. Corey LaJoie got the win. Kyle Larson finished second. Sergio Pena third. Chase Elliott fourth, and Brett Moffitt ran out of the top five. Travis Pastrana ran that race as well, and he finished sixth. And that's about it. Formula One is off this weekend. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. In case anybody's wondering where Patti Rodisch is, our usual co-host to have our 4-team team tonight, she is out of power right now here in Chicago. She is trying to get on the air. A little bit of a tornado watch right now that she's going through. She did say to me on Twitter and on Facebook she will be on the air, as soon as she can. So we are going to get to her as soon as she is able to get back on here. But right now, let's also turn it over to our other guest co-host tonight, Glenn. Let's get us caught up on the IndyCar Series. Obviously, Mid-Ohio we have this weekend. But what's been going on since the last time you've been on the air with us?
Well, last time that I was on with you guys, they raced the Edmonton Indy to a stellar finish. Elio Castroneves and Takuma Sato battled it out and used their push-to-pass for the last 15 laps. And it was an epic battle between the Brazilian and the Japanese. Man, and Elio Castroneves, who was denied a win for blocking in 2010, I believe it was, came across our finish line in first and finally got a win in Edmonton. I mean, that was perhaps a field perhaps the best feel-good moment of the year. And plus, you know, I've always said that Brazil produces drivers with the best smiles as well as with a lot of emotion, and you just really want to cry tears of joy with Elio Castroneves, because to finally win there and put aside, you know, everybody saying, oh, we almost had the win, but he was, you know, black flag for blocking. You know, that is certainly awesome. And of course, just recently we found out that Graham Rahal is not returning to the 38 car next year for the Service Center Ganassi team, but he could probably take a sponsorship with him. You just mentioned it, but now we're here in Mid-Ohio. Mid-Ohio is a really interesting racetrack, and plus one of the oldest road courses on the circuit. And this should be a fun race on this very narrow and tricky track.
Absolutely. Mid-Ohio is a very difficult track. Now, for those of us that have not been familiar with IndyCar as much as you, me, Rob, and Patti, explain to everybody, because you mentioned that those two were using the push-to-pass option for the last 15 laps. And I guarantee you, I watched that race as well. What a stellar performance by both those guys, Castroneves and Sato, just unbelievable. And I love seeing Castroneves win. It reminds me whenever he won the Indy 500 after all of his craziness, whenever he was on Dancing with the Stars and the problems that he was having at home, to come back and win that race. That was the kind of emotion I remember. But explain to the listeners what exactly the push-to-pass option is in IndyCar.
Well, what that is that it's sort of like a boost of energy that goes to the turbo and to the engine. Originally, you had a certain number of push-to-passes. So, for example, on a road course like, say, Mid-Ohio, you would have about 20 to 24 push-to-passes. On a oval, you would have a little bit less. So at a place like Texas, you would have about 18 to 20. Well, they got rid of it at the end of 2011, and then they brought it back for the last 5 races. But this time it's a little different. This time you can push that button down for as long as you want. But instead of the numbers of how many times you could do it, it was now seconds. And for the most part, every team would be given at least 250 seconds worth of a push-to-pass. So that means you could use those seconds any way you wanted to. You could go around the racetrack and run them all out, or you can do what Castroneves and Sato did. They conserved those seconds. And towards the end of that race, Elliott Castroneves saved a lot of his push-to-pass. Sure, he used it to, Sure, he used it to, pass everybody on the racetrack, because he started kind of back in the pack. But then towards the end, his team told him not to use it until there was about 9 laps of racing to go, and that's when Castroneves used it. And every time he used his, Sato used his as well. But here was the thing. Sato had used too much of it early on in the race, and actually ran out of it right there on the last turn coming to the checkered flag, while Elliott Castroneves still had about 5 seconds left in the tank. So it's certainly a controversial system. I mean, some people hate it, some people love it. I sort of like it. It's a really nice device in a way. Some people think it's a gimmick, but I don't like what they're going to do for tomorrow's race. And what they're doing is that to avoid these, and I quote, push to defend moves, IndyCar is implementing a 5-second delay on the push to pass. So that means when you push it, it's going to take 5 seconds to kick in. And so now you're going to have to plan ahead of time, okay, when do I need this? Do I need it coming out of the corner? Do I need it to go in the middle of the corner? But what happens if it comes on at the wrong time and your car shoots forward and you end up spinning somebody out, and IndyCar sees that as avoidable contact? That's going to really screw a lot of drivers up. And I'm sure that these guys have had tons of practice with practice number 1 and then the warm-up that they had earlier today, as well as in qualifying to figure this out. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys are going to work, and I have a feeling that probably we're going to see some avoidable contact penalties tomorrow.
You know, and it's very interesting. It kind of, to relate it to NASCAR, it's almost the same idea as whenever you have the 2-car draft. The driver in the front has to literally slam the throttle to get max speed. whereas the guy behind, I mean, I'm going back to Days of Thunder terminology here, the guy behind can go the exact same speed but doesn't have to use as much throttle. Then whenever he wants to pass, he's got that extra momentum, in essence like the push-to-pass option, then suddenly he can shoot by, almost like a slingshot move. But I do like the push-to-pass option. I will say I don't like this idea of the 5-second delay, because I think it's going to create, like you say, too much controversy, and if you hit it at the wrong time, and that delay and that doesn't kick in when you want it to, it could mean chaos. From what you've read, and Rob, you can give us your take on this option as well. From what the drivers have said so far, are they complaining more about it, or they just feel that it's an unknown factor at the moment?
You know what? I've been hearing a lot from the fan standpoint of this, and some people don't like it. A lot of people, think it's really great. But I think that drivers, seasoned vets like Dario Franchitti or even Scott Dixon or Tony Kanaan may not like this at all. Drivers like Simon Pagenaud, James Hinchcliffe, and Sato, who are just starting out in this series and are moving up. And are up in the big leagues now, they probably will like it. But I think this brings a lot of negative feedback from the drivers, and I have a feeling that probably this is only going to stick around for one race. But we'll have to wait and see. If it works out fine, then that means Sonoma, Baltimore, and Auto Club Speedway will have that in effect. If it doesn't work out so well, then probably look for IndyCar to take away this feature and just go back to the regular push-to-pass feature.
Rob, what do you think?
Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the push-to-pass. And I am one of those that feels it's a gimmick, feels it's a bit contrived to have more passing. But I also feel that with this car, the GW12, the races earlier in the season on the road courses were just fine, if you ask me, without the push-to-pass button. I thought they were very competitive. The race at Barber Motorsports Park comes to mind. I mean, I don't understand why IndyCar felt the need to go back to the push-to-pass. And now, hearing about this 5-second delay, that just kind of seems silly to me. For exactly what you said, Glenn. The delay could introduce some perils to the drivers as to when it's finally going to kick in. Like now I guess they would have to anticipate, I want to be using it here, so I have to push the button earlier, so now it'll kick in exactly where I want to use it, rather than pushing the button and then waiting for it to kick in, and it finally kicks in when you don't want to. But I just think that just kind of sounds silly to me. Personally, but like I said, I'm not a big fan of the whole idea of the push-to-pass.
And I think that is probably something that a lot of fans are going to possibly get used to. I kind of understand the use of it, but it takes a lot away from the driver's ability. I mean, they're relying on in essence, they're relying on extra horsepower to make a pass. I'd rather see the driver actually muscle his way and use his mind to make the pass. It's the same way in NASCAR. Use the draft to get sucked up to the guy, and then whenever you are ready to make that slingshot, duck down or duck high and make the pass the old-fashioned way. Use the muscle of the car. So I'm kind of on the fence with this. I like it in some sense. I don't like it in some sense. I think after seeing after Sunday's event and how the push-to-pass will work with the delay, I'll know my final determination. Right now, I'm going to say I'm on the fence because I don't want to say I like it because, yeah, it gives these guys more horsepower and more boost and more acceleration, and then I say I don't like it because now they have to time it a lot better. I'd rather personally see the guys use their cars and their mind and use the advantage that they have just without it. I mean, we're going to end up seeing what's going to happen. But, Glenn, what are you expecting tomorrow? Away from the push-to-pass, what are we going to expect at, Mid-Ohio this weekend, and who do you think is going to be the top dog in victory lane?
I think what we're going to expect at Mid-Ohio is going to be a lot of fighting for position. It's a very narrow track, and these EW12s are a little bit skinnier than what the original cars were. I definitely see some passes being made. Some you may have to do a little bump and run, and others you may have to, do some skill. But I definitely feel like it's going to be a marathon for these guys. And the drivers that I see doing very well, Will Power and Dario Franchitti. Will Power has the pole, and I don't think he's ever won here at Mid-Ohio. Dario Franchitti and Scott Dixon have a stranglehold on this racetrack. Last year, it was Scott Dixon that won the race. But Dixon has been having trouble with mechanical stuff. His engines have not been good. So I don't know if Scott Dixon is going to be a factor. But definitely Will Power and Dario Franchitti. Another guy that I think is probably going to be good is somebody like rookie Simon Pagenaud. Pagenaud, this track kind of fits his driving style. He seems to like these really skinny tracks. And does very well. I mean, back at Long Beach, he almost won the thing, but had to come in for a splash of gas. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everybody is going to place, and also how this race is going to work. But I think also a underdog for this race could be Oriol Servia. Servia is going to start way in the back, but it seems that no matter how often you put Servia back there, he comes up and he'll either finish top 10, top 5, or he may even get a podium. So I'll be keeping my eye on Oriol Servia, Pagenaud, and the rest there to see what they can do from the back.
Very interesting. Rob, who do you think is going to win, or don't you really have a pick this weekend for it?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and go with the pole sitter, Will Power. I know I'm really going out on a limb. No, I like Will Power. He seems to run well on oval as well as road courses, and but I do agree with Oriol Servia being a guy to watch. He always seems to be. He's always seems when I watch IndyCar to be very aggressive, and he's one guy in particular that I think is really fun to watch because of how aggressive he is. Because obviously in open wheel you have to be calculatingly aggressive. You can't be too aggressive because you can't lean on a guy like you can in a stock car. You have to, think about where you're going to be aggressive and where you're going to stick your wheels in. Servia, to me, is fun to watch, and I'll be interested to see if he can come from the back or not, and maybe give a run at the win tomorrow.
Very true. I really don't have a pick for this weekend. I do know, I agree with Glenn. It is going to be a very tight race, and with the new factors this weekend, it is going to be very interesting to watch, both from the driver's standpoint, the fan standpoint, and the sanctioning body standpoint. Because after this, they're going to have to make a really critical decision on that push-to-pass option. But it's going to be anybody's race, I can guarantee you that. Well, let's go ahead and let's get into some NASCAR news, and we're going to kick it off with the big story of the last couple of weeks. We all know whenever we were on the air for Daytona, we had breaking news of A.J. Allmendinger's failed drug test. Well, in the last couple of weeks, here's what has happened to get everybody caught up to speed. He had his second B sample tested from an independent lab and his own experts. He failed. And that means he subsequently went from a temporary suspension to an indefinite suspension. Now, A.J. Allmendinger, he elected, which we got to give the guy credit, he elected to go into NASCAR's Road to Recovery program. We don't know what he passed or what passed as far as the banned substance, but it was something that he felt he needs to go into treatment for. But here's the bad part. This past week, Allmendinger lost his ride. Roger Penske met with Allmendinger and made the decision that he would be removed out of the Shell Pennzoil Dodge, the number 22. And now, as of right now, the driver that is going to be handling the car is Sam Hornish Jr., who drives the Nationwide car. I'm going to open this up to you guys. First question that I have, what is the next step for Allmendinger?
Ooh. Rob, you want this?
Yeah, I'll take it. Well, the next step, obviously, is completing his program with no hiccups. He's got to go through the program as smoothly as possible, and that would mean it would be as quickly as possible. And then he can start looking to see if anyone will give him a ride, if any company will sponsor him. Personally, I think Allmendinger's future is dim in NASCAR, in the Sprint Cup Series at least. Maybe he'll be able to find a Nationwide Series ride, but why would you want a Nationwide Series ride when you've been at the Cup level? But also, at the same time, his future is quite bright, but not in NASCAR. His good friend and team owner that he won the Rolex 24 Hours race with back in February, Michael Shank, already says when he's done, he's got a ride here if he wants it. I've heard that there is an IndyCar team interested in having him drive already. So he does have options, but I feel that his options in the Sprint Cup Series will be limited. I'm sure he'll be able to find, a back marker ride, but it's not going to get as good as it was with the 22 car. And, that isn't just because of the failed drug test and the suspension. It also has to do with his performance. He's run average with the 43 car, but this year he just has not run well, and he was on a one-year contract. I mean, even before the suspension, it was very much in doubt that he would be, that even without the suspension, he would be back with the 22 Joe Penske team next year. So I would say, his Sprint Cup Series future looks dim, but I think his racing future as a whole maybe isn't as bad as some people are making it out to be.
Glenn, I'll pose this question to you, and then I'll give you my take, because it was going along the same lines. Did Penske really have any other option but to release Allmendinger?
You know what? Really, in this day and age, it's all about performance, and it's also all about how you're doing in finishes. I mean, this was Allmendinger's best year probably. He came off of winning the Rolex sports car race in Daytona, and he was finishing consistently. And these next few tracks that were coming up, Watkins Glen and many of these other tracks, were going to be his strong suits. But when something like this pops up, when you fail a drug test, it just puts a bad stamp on you. And really, I don't think Penske had any choice. I mean, some people are probably screaming, "Oh, sure he does, blah blah blah." No. Hang on. Listen to this. Penske only has two cars right now, two full-time cars in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, the Double Deuce and the Blue Deuce. There was really no place to put Allmendinger, quite frankly. And even if Allmendinger said that yes, he was going to complete the program, really keeping Allmendinger in a space, saying, "Oh, eventually he'll come back into this car," really is like holding a valuable spot in the field, a valuable car that somebody else, like upcoming talent, could be in. And so when Penske released Allmendinger, I was not that surprised, because Penske releases anybody who fails a drug test, and it's a shame to see that Allmendinger had basically got suspended there, and that his sample tested positive. But we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and I do not want to say, I absolutely do not want to say that Allmendinger was taking drugs or anything, because it could have been a mistake. But if he's willing to go through the drug program, then I give him props for that. As for his career in NASCAR, you know what? I don't think he should look at his racing career. He should look at getting clean, getting the approval, saying, "Okay, you can come back in the series now," and then think about where he wants to go. Because he could also go back to IndyCar racing, but where would he go? He can always come back to NASCAR racing, but where would he go? So really, I think it should be his health first, racing last.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, and let's be perfectly clear. We do not know what Allmendinger failed for. We do not know what substance or what drug or whatever it was caused the failure. Allmendinger said in a statement that he suspects that it was a stimulant because he would not knowingly take something. And let's be honest. He's not the kind of guy you would expect to fail. Just like we wouldn't expect, in 2009, we didn't expect Jeremy Mayfield to fail. And I had a friend of mine, we all know him on Twitter, Sal Segala Jr., who does a lot of work in the NHRA. He said that the one thing that he is kind of disappointed in the most is the PR personnel for Allmendinger and how they've handled this. Not stating what he failed for or whatnot. I really don't want to know what he failed for because that just opens a really big can of worms that's going to be spread out all over and can go any which way it wants. I personally think Allmendinger made a mistake, unknowing mistake, and it's very capable that it could be a stimulant, like something that he took whenever he was working out at the gym, something that he took at home. It could be something as simple as a cold medicine that didn't clear his system. It's something very simple. I will give Allmendinger big props. He has handled this in the most professional way that he can. He is not making any excuses. He is not making any blame, and he is certainly not, making any dumb threats or lawsuits. And let's face it. Whenever we first had the incident with Jeremy Mayfield, we were all in shock. But think about this. We were all in shock when it first happened, but we were appalled at how he personally handled it. And look at what it got him. It got him absolutely nowhere, and it pretty much not only ruined his racing career, it's pretty much ruined his life. Allmendinger has a very, very strong chance of making this a positive out of such a bad negative. Whenever he goes through this treatment, if he passes and NASCAR says, okay, you can come back, then, like Glenn, you said, then he can worry about his career. Does he want to go to NASCAR? Will he be welcomed back? I think that's the big thing that we are questioning. Will he be welcomed back by a team that wants to take the risk of hiring a driver that has failed a drug test? Like you say, Penske terminates anybody that fails a drug test, whether it be a driver, a crew member. It could be somebody that is at the race shop itself. If they fail, they lose their job. And it's unfortunate, but it's a good policy to go by. I will say for Allmendinger's sake, I believe that if he does pass the treatment, he will be welcomed back into NASCAR, and he will find a ride, but not the kind of ride that is typically going to be competitive. It could, at least at the Sprint Cup level. He may find one in Nationwide, he may find one in Truck, but if he doesn't want to take that, I can guarantee you he will find success in, the sports car series. He may go to IndyCar. We don't know. Right now, like Glenn said, he needs to focus not on his career. His career right now, it hasn't ended. It's just put on hold. It's like whenever you're playing a video game. Hit the pause button. It's on hold, and he needs to get himself better first. And here's the question I'm going to pose to you now. Sam Hornish Jr. is now in the 22 car. We don't know how long he will be or if he's going to be the permanent replacement, at least for the remainder of the season. Does this give him a better or a greater second chance to maybe land a ride in the Cup Series, whether it's with Penske or somebody else?
Well, Sam Hornish has been doing really well in the Nationwide Series for Penske Racing. And, of course, what happened was that Hornish came up into the Cup Series a little too fast in his first full-time season. I think it's actually a good fit because now this is like another audition for Sam Hornish because I heard the original plan was going to be that next year a possible third car would be added to the race team and move Sam Hornish up to the Cup Series with Penske Racing. Now this gives the Hornish a chance to audition again, and these last few races just go out there, not necessarily win, but just finish consistently. And if Shell Pennzoil, says we want Sam Hornish Jr. back in the series, then by all means, Sam Hornish will become the official driver of the Double Deuce. Because you can't necessarily pull up somebody like Parker Kligerman, who still needs a little bit more time in the series. Because as I've said before, these younger drivers are pulled up way too fast, and they just end up struggling. So I think it's a good idea that Sam Hornish stays in this ride, does well, and by the end of the year, we should know whether or not he's going to be back in the Double Deuce, or if Roger Penske is eyeing another driver that we don't even know about.
Rob, what's your take on this?
I think Hornish is a good fit and a bad fit. Hornish is a good fit for the fact of you know what you're going to get with him off the racetrack. He's going to be quiet, he's not going to be in the news, and he's going to represent your sponsors well. I mean, you look at what Shell Pennzoil has had to deal with since they left the 29 car at the end of 2010. They had to deal with Kurt Busch for 2011, who ended up getting fired at the end of last season. They then bring in A.J. Allmendinger, and he's gone within half a season because he's failed a drug test. Since 2010, Shell Pennzoil has just had negative publicity. And even, for the most part of Kevin Harvick's tenure with them, it wasn't so great either. I mean, nothing was bad off the track, but, besides the Daytona 500 win and finishing third in the points in 2010, they didn't have much success with him on the track. So between 3 years of not much success on the track, then finally having success on the track, but everything has been terrible off the track since 2011, they need someone who is stable. And you know that you'll get that with Sam Hornish Jr. However, I feel that on the track, in the Sprint Cup Series, Sam Hornish Jr. is a terrible fit for the number 22 car. I don't think he's taken this racing stock cars well. I mean, you look at his Nationwide Series stats, he's run 52 races, basically full seasons every year since 2006, and he's got one win and 7 top 5s and 18 top 10s. In the Sprint Cup Series, he only has 2 top 5s to his name and 8 top 10s. I know people say he was rushed over to the Sprint Cup Series too early, and I'll agree with that. But he's had plenty of time in the Nationwide Series, and he's minus sitting 4th in the points right now, and that one win at Phoenix last year, he hasn't shown me much in a stock car. I know your opinions on this, Glenn, but who I would personally like to see in 22, if it happens to fall that way, would be Joey Logano. You look at his Nationwide Series stats, he doesn't run, for the most part, doesn't run the full schedule. He's running full Cup schedule. He runs a lot of races, but not the full series. He's got 14 wins in the Nationwide Series, 48 top 5s, and 79 top 10s in 101 races. He's got, not only does he have more top 5s than Sam Hornish has in the Sprint Cup Series with 16, he also has 2 wins in the Sprint Cup Series and 36 top 10s. And he's only 22 years old. And from all indications, he seems to be great with sponsors off the track as well. I mean, you never hear Joey in the news except for where's he going to drive. It never seems to be anything bad with Logano. Minus the Delana was the fire suit in the family comment from Pocono in 2010. That seems to be the only time he's ever really had negative news. I think he would be a good fit if he has to leave Joe Gibbs Racing. And all signs seem to indicate that he may end up leaving there, with most likely Matt Kenseth moving over to take the 20 ride. There is also the possibility of Ryan Newman, but I think that one is a bit of a stretch, as it seems that Newman and team owner Tony Stewart are making every possibility to make him come back next year. They seem to be really good friends. There's minus sponsorship, there seems to be no reason why he shouldn't be back at Stewart-Haas Racing next year.
No, and I'll go along with that. Sam Rodisch, let's be honest, he is a good driver. I mean, he's not a bad driver by any stretch of the imagination. But as far as being in a stock car, it just hasn't worked out like he would have expected. And that's not, bashing Sam as a person or anything like that. Any driver that comes from open wheel to stock cars is going to have some struggles. I mean, we all knew Danica Patrick was going to have it. We knew, I think at the same time, whenever even Tony Stewart was making the transition from open wheel to stock car, he was going to see some trouble. But he took to it really quick. Everybody's going to learn a little at a different pace. But you make a great point. There are still some big candidates for next year that are up in the air as far as where they're going to land up. You mentioned Joey Logano. How about this name in the pot? Matt Kenseth. Keep in mind, he is not going to be with Roush Fenway next year. He is going to be looking for a ride as the season goes on. Maybe Penske can all of a sudden get one of the hottest free agents in NASCAR to come and join his team and surprise everybody. There's still a lot of big questions yet to be answered with this. And it's going to take, weeks and months to find out what exactly is going to happen. It's going to be something that we're all going to be looking for. We'll obviously keep you updated on our show and on our blogs about it. But it's going to be interesting to see how exactly this saga continues for Penske, Allmendinger, and everybody involved. Well, already we're a third of the way into the show. We want to thank you for listening in to Lugnuts and Horsepower here on the Fan vs. Fan Radio Network. Dustin Parks is your host tonight. I'm here with Rob Blount and our guest co-host tonight, Glenn Locke. Patti Rodisch is still not called in. She is out of Chicago with no power. They have a tornado watch going on. Patti, stay safe. If you make it on, great. If not, we completely understand. Let's go ahead and let's review last weekend's events at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. No Lucas Oil Raceway, O'Reilly Raceway Park, whatever the heck that other speedway is named now. It was all at the big track, and what a race it was, but a lot of controversy, at least when it came to the nationwide race, and we are going to open it up with that before we get into Jimmie Johnson's minutes of the Brickyard 400, actually the Crown Royal 400. Let's try to explain what happened. In essence, the start of the race and the final restart were much the same. The leader or pole sitter took the green but didn't go. The guy that was second launched. Well, here was the difference. At the beginning of the race, whenever Kane spun his tires, Kyle Busch went, NASCAR deemed it okay. When the same thing happened at the end of the race between Brad Keselowski and Elliott Sadler, they said Sadler jumped the start and he was black flagged. Here's my question to you guys. Did NASCAR blow that late race call?
Yeah, I think so. What was he supposed to do? I understand you're not supposed to beat the leader back to the line, but it is obvious that Brad Keselowski spun his tires, and at the same time, he's being pushed by someone behind him. So what's he supposed to do? How is he supposed to keep from beating the 22 to the line? The worst part about it, in my opinion, is just how unclear NASCAR was about everything. They told Sadler, apparently, when he met with them in the trailer after the race, that he wasn't being penalized for jumping the restart. Then you look at the official penalty list, and it states on it that Stu was penalized for jumping the restart. So what was it? It's clear what the penalty was, but what? I understand he beat Keselowski to the line, but I don't understand what they expected him to do at that point. They always say, be reasonable about it. You know what you're supposed to do. You know what you're supposed to do. He knows what he's supposed to do. But he was being pushed. How is he supposed to do what he's supposed to do when someone is hindering that for him? You saw I'm sure you saw on Twitter after the race, Kevin Harvick, Jeff Burton, Jimmie Johnson, Mark Martin, and I believe there are a few more. I think even Jeff Gordon also said it. They all felt that Sadler was screwed. There was no other way to put it. I feel the same way. They all said, we've been racing for how long, and if we don't understand the rules at this point, that's pretty sad on us, but they all seem to have the same exact understanding of the rules. And when you have a bunch of guys, Jimmie Johnson, 5-time champion, Gordon, 4-time champion, that's 9 championships right there. Burton's competed for championships. Harvick's come close. We all know Mark Martin's come close many times. Multiple race winners. When you have all those guys with a lot of experience saying, what did he do wrong? We see that he did nothing wrong. There's something wrong there, and it's not what Sadler did with NASCAR, in my opinion. I understand the ruling at the start of the race. Kane felt, for some reason, that he was supposed to start the race when the start of the race is always started by the flagman, and he just didn't go and Kyle beat him to the line. I'm fine with that one. But I think the ruling with Sadler at the end of the race was flat out wrong. I really feel they just took the win away from him. And, I feel they messed up. It's okay to mess up. It happens. How many times do we see blown calls in the NBA or NHL or NFL or Major League Baseball? But you can come out and say you messed up instead of just coming up with this convoluted explanation to make yourself look like you didn't.
Glenn, what about you? Do you feel the same way that Sadler got screwed?
It's a double-edged sword because we saw that Austin Dillon virtually pushed Elliott Sadler across the line. And everything would have been just fine if Sadler had given the position back to Brad Keselowski, but he didn't. And I really wonder if they talked about that in the drivers' meeting before this, or if they completely blew it over, or if he forgot about that. Because, that's something that we don't normally do that often on these restarts. But what really made me angry was the fans, because when Sadler served his penalty, that put the lead back in the hands of Brad Keselowski. Keselowski led the final 13 laps, and he won the race. And fans said that the race was given to Keselowski. Well, let me straighten them out. Keselowski earned the win. He led a good part of that race. You're not given a win if you've led that much. You're only given a win if it's a rain-shortened race, if for some reason you're knocked out of the way and the guy behind you in second place, gets it. But I'm sorry. The fans said that Keselowski didn't earn it. Brad Keselowski earned that win. Pure and simple, clear as a bell. And so, in my opinion... Okay.
Don't like interrupting anybody. That's my bad.
That's all right. But really, it was a double-edged sword. So I really have no comment on that. But I just wanted to put that out there, that the races are earned, not given.
And that's a very good point. Yes, Brad Keselowski had the best car for majority of that race. I do think that NASCAR needs to clarify the rule as far as the start of the race versus restarting the race, because they deemed the start of the race illegal because the flagman started the race, not Kane, and that confused everybody. So that's a tough call. That is a very tough call for NASCAR to make, and one that they unfortunately had to make. So, I'll just say it on this. I think NASCAR blew the call, but in such a short time, they were kind of in a box and they had to do something. Did he break the rule? Didn't he break the rule? We're not sure. All we know is that Sadler, in his mind, got screwed. And we'll just leave it at that. Well, we're now down to the halfway point here on Lugnuts and Horsepower. We got 45 minutes left, and my good friend Rob here has a little bit of a comment or a question that we were posed earlier this week whenever we were going through the show format. And Rob, I'm going to let you ask this question, and I think Glenn may have a little bit of fun with this. What is it?
All right. Well, here's my question. And if you saw my blog post on NASCARLugnuts.com yesterday around noon Eastern Time, you would already know it. But my question, I'm sure we're halfway through the 30th Olympic Games going on in London right now. If you don't know that, I don't know where you've been for the last week. I mean, it seems the Olympics right now is the biggest story basically in the world. My question is, should auto racing be an Olympic event? I mean, we see sports, speed walking is an Olympic event. I don't want to put speed walking down because someone from my high school is actually the only female American in that event, and she's actually the favorite to win it. So I don't want to put that event down because I really hope she wins. But speed walking is an Olympic event. Ping pong is an Olympic event. The trampoline is an Olympic event. There are things that seem so strange that normally, people wouldn't consider to be true sports that are Olympic events. And the main, it seems that detractors of auto racing always say, well, it's not a real sport. Well, in that case, in my opinion, it would fit right into the Summer Olympics. I think it would be very awesome to see in one event guys like Jimmie Johnson, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, representing Team USA, taking on guys like Sebastian Loeb, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, and Fernando Alonso, in one event representing their countries. I think it would be really, really awesome to see. I think it could be a possibility. I mean, well, it's not that it could be a possibility that they would do it. I just think it is possible. It shouldn't be impossible, is what I'm trying to say. I would like to hear what you guys think on it.
It's an interesting question. But at the same time, and I don't mean to make this sound really odd, but it seems like we almost had sort of an Olympic-style racing event. Didn't we used to call that the IROC Series? Because that, in a way, was an all-star event from all aspects. Now, albeit, self-admitted, the IROC Series was leaning more towards the aspect of the stock car guys because they raced on mostly oval racetracks. I think I've only seen maybe 2 road courses for the IROC Series. But that's what it was. You had guys that came from open wheel racing, came from dirt track racing, sprint cars, and stock cars at one event. And everybody was racing the exact same style car. No adjustments, or all the adjustments were the same. All the car setups were the same. Tire pressures, everything was exactly the same. The only thing that was different was the color of the car and the driver. So in a way, we kind of already have it. So I'm kind of on the fence. Would I like to see it happen? Of course I would. I think it'd be a very interesting idea. The only thing is, what kind of race would it be? Are we going to go rally racing? Are we going to go off-road racing? Are we going to go stock car racing? What are we going to do? That's my biggest question. How would they end up doing it? Glenn, what do you think?
Once again, this is rather an interesting concept. And for one thing, I know that a lot of people would definitely want to see racing in the Olympics. But I think that some people who live for these things probably would not want to see it, because when we think of the Olympics, what do we think of? We think of track and field, we think of swimming, we think of gymnastics, we think of stuff that you do without the help of any electronic equipment or anything that has a motor in it. It's just you and your body against, nature and all the stuff that goes on. I'm sort of teetering on this. It would be kind of neat to see racing become a part of the Olympics, but then again, think of like the backlash that could happen, over this, because there's some people, unlike us, who are racing freaks that watch IndyCar, NASCAR, F1, Rolex, you name it. Any racing series will watch, but there's certain people that don't watch racing, so it can probably bring a lot of fans. It could split the fans. Some people could boycott this. Some people could say, hey, come on, check it out. So really, once again, it's another double-edged sword topic that I am very much in the middle. I'm very much in the middle right there.
Here's here's a unique idea. Or I shouldn't say idea, but here's a unique question. In a way, each year, if you think about it, whenever it gets to time for midsummer, we have the X Games. And the X Games are a very, very prestigious event for a lot of people. Look at the success that Travis Pastrana has had, and not just on a motorcycle doing freestyle. Look at the success he's had in rally car at this event. And then you get into guys like, Tony Hawk, who have won multiple X Games gold medals. People, like Jeremy McGrath, who have won step-up competitions and whatnot. And the things that happen there. If I was to do some sort of event or Olympic event that had to do with NASCAR, I don't think I'd want to do it in the Olympics. I'd want to put it somewhere that kind of fits in the genre, maybe not totally, but something along those lines. I'd put it in something like the X Games. Maybe do sort of like a stock car cross. Take the IROC series, the same kind of idea as similar cars, similar Pontiac Firebird Trans Ams and whatnot, and have them race on an actual street course. See how these guys can handle that kind of situation. Guys like Jeff Gordon may not have had as much road racing experience, but are very good in a stock car when it comes to being on a road course. Let's face it, Gordon is probably one of the top guys on a road course whenever they go to Infineon and Watkins Glen. I think it fits more along the lines of that aspect versus in the Olympics. That's just my take on it right now. Rob, do you agree with that, or do you still feel like maybe it should be an Olympic event?
I can see what you're saying, but I think if the only way this would be able to get done is basically every racing series was to take a week off at the same time, and I don't feel that it would be worth it to stop everyone's season for an X Games event. But the Olympics has prestige to it. Like in the wintertime, the NHL, actually not just the NHL, but all leagues of hockey around the world stop for 3 weeks so that their players can go to the Olympics. And they put on great games. And what I found was really great, because I am a hockey fan myself, was in 2010 in Vancouver, the hockey games got fantastic ratings, especially the U.S. versus Canada gold medal game. And the ratings for the rest of the 2010 season was way higher, as well as the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs were way higher, because the Olympics brought a lot of attention to the sport, and the people who got interested in watching the game at the Olympics kept with it for the rest of the year. And a lot of people, like myself, I've watched water polo the last couple days. I'm not a diehard water polo fan by any means, but I'm going to watch if Team USA is involved. And I know that there are many people who watch basically any Olympic event if Team USA is involved. And I'm sure that there will be quite a few people that would be willing to watch racing, to watch the Americans, to support the Americans. And you know what? They may say, this is pretty cool. And maybe they'll stick with watching a form of racing, whether it be NASCAR or IndyCar or Formula One, as the year goes on. And maybe we'll gain some new fans that way. It was funny, though, that you brought up the IROC series. That was, the way my mind thinks, I'm constantly thinking about racing all the time, and I've already thought up a format for having it in the Olympics, and it was pretty much based off of the IROC series. And the reason I thought of it that way was because the boss of Formula One, Bernie Eccleston, already approached the heads of the International Olympic Committee about having Formula One as an Olympic event. And they said no, because they felt it would be too dependent on the car and not as much on the person. And, I can agree with that, especially as far as Formula One is concerned. Look at the last 2 years. Sebastian Vettel with the RB6 chassis and RB7 chassis absolutely dominated Formula One for the last 2 years. This year, the car isn't as good as the McLarens are and as the Ferraris are, and now he's struggling a bit. And Fernando Alonso is now up there, and now this year it's actually wide open because he's not dominating because the car isn't as good. So in Formula One, I can agree with that. But if you were to go with completely even cars like we had in the IROC series, that would basically take the car out of the equation, and it would be just down to the drivers to decide who was the best, if you ask me. I think you should do it on the road courses. How many road courses are there around the world? There's plenty of them. I'm sure there's at least 5 in basically just about any country that you could think of hosting the Olympics in. So you would have a venue at least, Do it so that there's no pit stops. The races are short enough, there's no pit stops. Again, we're not focusing on pit crews on who's winning the race, but just drivers here. The way they manage their equipment, not crash themselves, and manage their tires. It would be purely about which driver would be best at that point. And I think it would be very cool. I think it would raise a lot of attention as well if there are people out there who say that, and I know that there are, who say, I'll watch any event that Team USA is in, because I'm going to support my country. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people just like that who would be willing to watch racing in the Olympics and maybe would become a fan down the road. And if not, they don't. But I think it would be very cool to see.
It is a lot different.
I don't think it'll happen anywhere in the near future.
No, it's not going to happen in the near future. We're not going to be looking 4 years ahead and say, oh, look, auto racing is in the Olympics. It's not going to happen. It's going to take, if it were to happen, I can tell you it's going to take a lot of working out, and I can tell you if it does happen, there will not be one dominant country because everybody's going to be on an even slate. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You mentioned hockey. We all know that whenever it gets to be the Winter Olympics, who's going to be the team that everybody's going to look to beat? Canada. Why? It's their only sport. That's what they dominate. Well, that in the mutant form of football, we have 13 men. We have a longer field. Okay, have fun. Hockey is theirs.
The national sport of Canada is not hockey, but lacrosse.
And there's another good point. Lacrosse is one that they are very, very good at. U.S. is good at lacrosse, don't get me wrong, but if you were to look at the sports, U.S. versus Canada, the sports that they are the most dominant in are lacrosse and hockey. Here in the U.S., the sports that we are most dominant in, if we were to look at, overall, would be baseball and basketball. I think if you put in racing, you literally have, instead of having, one favorite, 2 favorites, everybody's even because you are taking the best guy or best guys and gals out of each country, and they are all even. I like the idea. Will it happen? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Using the idea of the basis as the IROC series where you basically are focusing on the driver and saying the cars are all even, you go out and you win the race. That's basically saying the driver is in control. That is the only way I can see them doing it. But again, like you say, I don't see it happening in the near future. But we're down to about a half hour left to go here on Lugnuts and Horsepower. We thank you all for joining in. Again, Patti Rodisch did not make the call tonight to be on the air. Her power is out in Chicago. Patti, we are so sorry that you're not on the air with us, but hey, just stay safe out there. We know how big thunder and lightning and tornadoes can be in the area. We just now left the Olympic topic, and we're going to finish up with Indy before we preview Pocono. I'm just going to say it. Was that a butt-whooping or what by Jimmie Johnson?
Yeah, that was perhaps a great almost said Indianapolis 500. I meant Brickyard 400, but I had Jimmie Johnson picked on the Motorsports Nation show, and he just put a serious butt whooping on the entire field, and I actually thought that Kyle Busch was going to have a little something for him, but Jimmie Johnson just had that better of a car. And of course, he stirred up a lot of fans when he did the burnout there on the yard of bricks. I saw the replay again, and his left side tire, was just burning it right there on the bricks, and people were saying he had no glass, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to set the record straight. The yard obviously the Brickyard is enriched in tradition, and we all know that. Almost every track is enriched in tradition. And in NASCAR, what else can you do in a celebration? Sure, some people take a Polish victory lap, some people backflip, and some people take the American flag around the racetrack, and we're all chanting USA, USA. But sometimes the first thing on some drivers' minds is to, do a burnout. And so basically I can say this. Sure, a lot of fans have said that you can't do a burnout at the Indianapolis 500, but you know what? It was NASCAR. Let's make the exception, all right? So yeah, Jimmie Johnson doing the thing on the Art of Bricks, probably should have done it at a different part of the racetrack, but when you win, you don't care where you are on the racetrack. You could even be on the backstretch. You could even be in the parking lot and start doing burnouts. It doesn't matter where you are on the racetrack. Just do something to celebrate, man. Let it all out.
And let's also remember one thing about Jimmie Johnson and the victory. You got to also give credit for Chad Knaus, because he knew whenever Jimmie won at Dover what he was going to do with that car. They literally took that car back to the Hendrick shop and didn't bring it back to the racetrack until Indianapolis. They worked on the car. They tweaked it. They made it better. They put brand new colors on it. Because remember, whenever he won at Dover, he ended up coming out of the car in Victory Lane with that big old, clown hat on, celebrating the Madagascar movie. They put a brand new body on it, and they made sure that car didn't even see the hauler for the racetrack until they loaded up to go to Indy. That is how confident Chad Knaus and the entire 48 team were in that car coming to Indy. As far as the burnout goes, let's face it, it's NASCAR. That has become the most honest and common way for anybody to celebrate a win. We have guys that'll, do the regular victory lap, taking the checkered flag. Some will take the Polish victory lap, started by the late, great Alan Kowicki. We have I'm so glad DW came up with this, because at the time I didn't figure out what to name it. But we could also see what Kurt Busch did whenever he was in the 2 car and he won in Atlanta and Texas. The appropriately named unwind lap, where he does a victory lap in reverse. I mean, you got to do something to celebrate. What does the IndyCar guys do? All they do is they just pull up, get up out of the car, and cheer the fans. Well, unless, you're Helio Castroneves and decide, I think I'm going to climb this fence. And we also got to give credit where credit is due. Whenever Tony Stewart started doing that, a few years ago in 2005, after he won at Daytona, he did it better than Castroneves. He actually climbed up the entire fence into the flag stand. So we got to give him credit there. Everybody's going to celebrate a different way. You have Edwards with the backflip, and now he does his fan celebration. Brad Keselowski flies the American flag. But what does everybody expect to see whenever a NASCAR driver wins a race? A burnout. That's what you're going to end up seeing most of the time, whether it's at the Brickyard, whether it's at Daytona, whether it's at Martinsville, you name it, it's probably going to end up happening. I will say this, though. I wish that Jimmie would have been at the very end of that line, right where he decided to burn up those tires, and he had to place his kiss on the bricks right there. He probably would have looked at his and said, I need a breath mint. Rob, what's your take on that, on Jimmie Johnson's win and everything else at Indianapolis?
It was pretty amazing how fast that car was. I mean, no one had anything for him. It was almost pretty obvious early in the race he was going to win it, unless, some freak thing happened. That said, finding out midway through the race that was his Dover car.
That was it. They brought the same car that won at Dover to Indianapolis.
Yeah, now finding that out, since I have tickets to Dover in September, where Johnson is always, obviously, as we know, ridiculously good, I'm suddenly not so looking forward to that race. It seems like that car is just awesome. they just did a fantastic job building that race car. I mean, you dominate at Dover, and then take it to Indianapolis, a track that is completely different from Dover, and it dominates there. You know you got yourself a fantastic race car. As far as him doing a burnout on the bricks, I personally could care less. I mean, he's celebrating a win. Do it where you want to do it. Personally, the only thing I had an issue with that weekend was Brad Keselowski's team kissing the bricks on Saturday. And I feel that is what everyone should have been upset with, not Jimmie doing a burnout on the bricks. I thought it was a bit ridiculous that a support series, A, was racing there, as you guys know from the show 2 weeks ago, and B, that the winner of said support series would kiss the bricks like they just won the Brickyard 400 or the Indianapolis 500. They did not. I felt that he should have just done, a simple burnout, do the flag waving like he always does, which I love, and I felt that should have been it. Because now, guess what? He's already kissed the bricks at Indy. How is it going to be anywhere near as special when if he wins the Brickyard 400? I can't see how it would be. He's already done it. That's my opinion on that.
And, you bring up an interesting topic, because let's keep this in mind. For years and years and years, the Indy 500 winner, the tradition has been they would get the wreath in victory lane and they would drink, a glass of milk. Or, in this case, a big jug of milk, glass jug. NASCAR really didn't have a tradition for whenever they won at Indy starting in 1994. But in 1996, it was just a fluke. Dale Jarrett, whenever he won the race, which he won over his then teammate Ernie Irvan, he went out and he kissed the bricks. It was not planned. It was just something that happened. And then all of a sudden, NASCAR started saying, you know what? Let's make this something that we do every year. The winner of the race gets to kneel down and kiss the bricks that they had just run on for 400 miles and saw several hundred tires go across. And then Indy started doing it. I'm not sure if it's as special, whenever, yes, Brad Keselowski won the nationwide race and then went down and kissed the bricks. I'm not going to say it's going to be as special as if he does end up winning the Brickyard, the big race. But if you win at Indy on any sort of aspect, it means something. I mean, look at Juan Pablo Montoya. He's already won at Indianapolis. He's an Indy 500 winner. Is that going to be, if he wins the Brickyard 400 one year, does that take away the special feeling he had whenever he won that race? I don't think so. He still is an Indy winner. Brad Keselowski can say, without a shadow of a doubt, he is an Indy winner. And I think that is more important than anything. He can actually say to his kids, to his wife, and to his car owner and everybody at Penske who has a rich history at that track and says, yes, I won at Indianapolis. And that, in my opinion, is all that matters. Well, looking ahead, this weekend, it's another 2.5-mile racetrack. It's got similar banking as Indianapolis, but it's got a fresh coat of pavement that only has one Sprint Cup race on it. But here's the difference. There's no fourth turn. Welcome back to Pennsylvania and the Pocono Raceway. Glenn, Rob, what are we expecting on this flat track now that we have one race under our belts on the new asphalt, aside from hopefully less pit road penalties?
You know what? I think we're probably going to find the same thing that we did in the springtime, or the first time that we came here. A lot of strung out racing, not too many opportunities to pass. Pretty much where everybody is, it's hard to get track position unless you run this race backwards, like get on a road course strategy, and work it like that. But the other problem that we're going to run into is that I've been told that there is some rain scheduled for tomorrow, and one of the weather reporters on Twitter says that we may only go to halfway. So you also got to keep in the back of your head, when's the rain going to hit? Because if the rain hits and we're past the halfway point, that could be the race right there. So probably we're going to see some more intense racing just to get to that yellow flag, because that yellow flag for rain could be what decides, who's in the winner's circle. It could be anybody. It could be somebody new. It could be somebody old. Heck, it could even be somebody who decides to stay out on track, and doesn't come into pit road. So it'll be interesting.
Rob, what about you? Do you echo Glenn's statement, or do you think it could be something else?
Yeah, I agree with that, especially hearing about rain in the forecast. I think we will see a lot of intense racing tomorrow. I mean, we saw back in June, they raced pretty intense because it was 100 miles shorter. I thought it was a great move that Pocono made, dropping the race distance from 500 to 400. They couldn't just wait in the middle part of the race like they usually do at Pocono. We had to go. And now tomorrow, if they're racing only to halfway, obviously that makes the race even shorter. And they really would have to go tomorrow. So it could make it very interesting, or we could see what we saw in California earlier this year, where they really didn't even race to halfway. They just ran off laps until they got to halfway and got the heck out of there with no action at all. But I think it should be a pretty good race. I thought the way the track raced back in June shocked me. How racy the track was for being freshly repaved, and because it was Pocono. I mean, you don't typically hear Pocono and intense racing in the same sentence too often. And you also don't especially hear that when you hear the track being repaved either. But that was pretty much exactly what we had. I mean, we had a great battle for the lead. There was quite a few restarts because there were 7 cautions, and restarts are always exciting at Pocono. And I wouldn't be shocked if we have more of the same tomorrow. Unfortunately, I have to miss it. I'll be in Manhattan tomorrow. I'll have to find out who wins after the fact.
And this is my home track in aspect because I am from Pennsylvania. I think we are going to see probably a more competitive race because they want to get to halfway, and track position is going to be extremely critical if rain does come in. I can echo that statement. They are calling for rain in the Pocono area. Not sure how much or how long it's going to last, but they are calling for rain at, the Pocono Raceway at some point. Whether it's going to affect the entire race, make it go halfway, or if it's just going to delay it enough and say, okay, we're going to run later into the evening than we originally planned, it's going to make it interesting. And let's face it, for the last 5 years, at least one race at Pocono has had some sort of weather effect. I mean, look at what happened last year here. We had a downpour midway through the race before they said, oh, it's cleared up enough. We're going to make this to the end. So anything is possible, especially, and if they do get rain and they are able to restart it, it's, again, an entire new racetrack because all that rubber that they built up on for the past 2 days, it's gone. It's going to be a fresh track, and everybody's handling is going to change. So it's going to be critical how these guys manage their tires, manage their positions, and where they make their moves. But it's going to be I think it's going to be a pretty good race. I'm not going to say it's going to be exciting, but anything is possible. The only excitement, like I said before, the only excitement we had at the first race was wondering who's the next guy that's going to get nabbed for speeding. Hopefully this time they don't end up having 24 penalties and a couple of them by multiple drivers. We shall see. But I tell you what, with 15 minutes left to go, it is time to make our picks for the Pennsylvania 400, which is going to be live on ESPN starting at 12 noon Eastern. Glenn, Rob, then me. Who do you have taking the checkered flag?
Well, on the Motorsports Nation show, I chose Jeff Gordon, and he's way back in the pack right now. But I was very surprised to see that Juan Pablo Montoya got the pole for this race. But there's certainly a lot of good cars out there, and I think I'm probably going to go with Brad Keselowski on this. I picked him last year, and he won, and I have a good feeling that probably Brad Keselowski could get it done.
Rob?
I was going to go with Brad Keselowski. I am starting him in my for my Yahoo Fantasy team tomorrow, but I'm not going to pick him to win the race for the simple fact of it's already a decently short race now that it's down to 400 miles. Track position is obviously very key, and with the fact that we might only be racing the halfway tomorrow, him starting 31st might be too tough to overcome. Instead, I'm going to revisit my pick for the last time this Cup Series raced at Pocono back in June, and it worked out quite well. He's starting 10th. He says he has a car that can win again tomorrow. I'm going to go with him again. I'm going to go with the 20 car Joey Logano and see what happens.
You know, not a bad pick. Defending winner from in the spring. Good pick. I'm actually along with Glenn on this one. I picked Brad Keselowski. He is last year's winner, and keep in mind he won that race on a bad foot. He's healthy now, so I think that's going to be a good pick for him this weekend. But at the same time, I'm picking Brad Keselowski because in some way, in some form, Penske Racing needs to have a positive week. It's been a rough, since Daytona, it's been rough for those guys. They've kept their head up and they've kept going. But we have seen a victory, from the likes of Brad Keselowski since then. But since Daytona, it has been a very rough time for these guys. If Penske gets into victory lane this weekend, they're not going to remember what happened with A.J. Allmendinger over the last, several weeks and what's happened since with him being released and having to go into the treatment program. They're going to remember a victory. They're going to remember not what happened, but here and now. So I'm going to go with the Blue Deuce and pick him to win at Pocono as the defending race winner and hopefully get me back up in the standings on the fan versus fan victory pool. Well, we're just a little over 10 minutes left to go. We want to thank you all so much for listening into this hour-and-a-half edition of Lugnuts and Horsepower. We're going to go ahead and get into our closing thoughts. Glenn, I'll let you start it off tonight. I want to first thank you for coming on. I didn't know you were coming on since Patti never told me, but, hey, you're always here for once a month with IndyCar News. Tell us where you'll be for the next couple of weeks and what we can expect from IndyCar over the next month or so.
Well, you can basically expect this race, and then after that, there's a bit of a good chunk of off time that'll be coming up before the Eyes on IndyCar Series comes out to California to run at Sonoma, the GoPro Grand Prix of Sonoma. And also, F1 will be back in action at the end of the month at the famous Spa-Francorchamps. And you can basically find me on Twitter at GL2488. This month is going to be kind of busy as, I'm off of school right now, and I go back at the end of August. And look out for some cool avatars, some great photos coming out. In fact, one that I'll be bringing out will be my official one. It'll be really cool, and I'll tell you this, that Bugs Bunny is going to be in there somewhere, so make sure you check that out. You can also catch me on Motorsports Nation. Comes on every Monday night at 4 o'clock Pacific Time, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, only on TalkShoe.com, and, of course, a couple of Disney Geeks, which is right now on hiatus, but will be coming back very soon. That's also here on Blog Talk Radio. And of course, I had a fun time with you guys, everyone. And, one more thing before I go. Make sure you guys tune in to the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio tomorrow on ABC. Don't miss it.
Absolutely. You can be sure that we will be tuning in. Rob, your turn.
All right, well, you guys know you can catch me usually fairly often on Twitter. I'm at Rob Blount, Blount on there. I cover the Nationwide Series on Patti's page on NASCARLugnuts.com. I'll have the recap of tonight's race from Iowa up, within minutes of the race ending. And I also pretty much put out, one column a week on just whatever I'm thinking about. This week it was, the possibility of Olympics and auto racing in the Olympics, not Olympics and auto racing. That was backwards. Tomorrow you won't be able to catch me on Twitter. Like I said, I won't be watching the race tomorrow. I won't be watching any racing tomorrow. I'm going to be in Manhattan supporting my mom, who is she is a newly published author. Her first novel, Send, came out last week. It debuted actually 3 days ago on the 1st. Tomorrow she's doing her first book reading as a published author, so the whole family's going to be heading into the city to watch that and give her support. We're all really excited for her and really proud of her. And Glenn, I didn't know that you were on a Disney radio show. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to have to tell my girlfriend about that. She loves anything Disney related. She's actually doing the Disney World internship program. Actually, I think she leaves in a week and a half. She's going to be down in Disney World until the beginning of January, working down there as one of the PhotoPass photographers. I'm going to have to tell her to check out your show.
Hey, can't complain about that too much. And obviously, Patti wasn't here tonight, but you can follow her at NASCAR_Lugnuts on Twitter. She's also been on Facebook. You can keep up with her page. She will definitely be on tomorrow, hopefully if their power comes back. Sorry she couldn't be on tonight, but hey, we got to give her a shout-out. I'll be on Twitter tomorrow covering the race. It is /all horsepower on there. You can find me on Facebook. And before we go tonight, I want to give a special plug to next week's episode, which is going to be the podium finish. Our boy Rob Tillingson is going to be back on the air covering for his run over the next couple of weeks. His show will be on at 12 noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. He has been a great addition to the Fan vs. Fan Radio Network. We've been getting a lot of great conversation, a lot of great listens, and a lot of live listens. That's what we've been wanting for the last few weeks. We at least on our show a couple weeks ago, hit over 2,000 live listens. I'll find out the results tomorrow as far as who all was listening in and who all is going to listen on the archives. We want to thank everybody for that because that was a great episode, especially with all the controversy that was going on the last couple of weeks with Allmendinger. I'm sure we'll have a lot more coming up in a couple of weeks once we return on the air. The date that we will be back on the air is August 18th, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. West. We will have all the updates from Pocono and Watkins Glen, which are the two races that will happen in between our airing. So, again, we want to thank everybody for listening in to Lugnuts and Horsepower tonight. On behalf of myself, Rob, Glenn, and Patti, yeah, we know you're out there. We want to thank you for listening in, and tune in next week to the podium finish, and be sure to tune in 2 weeks from tonight to the next episode of Lugnuts and Horsepower.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.
In IndyCar.
Well, what that is that it's sort of like a boost of energy that goes to the turbo and to the engine. Originally, you had a certain number of push-to passes. So, for example, on a road course like, say, Mid-Ohio, you would have about 20 to 24 push-to passes. On a oval, you would have a little bit less. So at a place like Texas, you would have about 18 to 20. Well, they got rid of it at the end of 2011, and then they brought it back for the last 5 races. But this time it's a little different. This time you can push that button down for as long as you want. But instead of the numbers of how many times you could do it, It was now seconds. And for the most part, every team would be given at least 250 seconds worth of a push to pass. So that means you could use those seconds any way you wanted to. You could go around the racetrack and run them all out, or you can do what Castroneves and Sato did. They conserved those seconds. And towards the end of that race, Elliott Castroneves saved a lot of his push to pass. Sure, he used it to, excuse me, sure he used it to, pass everybody on the racetrack because he started kind of back in the pack. But then towards the end, his team told him not to use it until there was about 9 laps of racing to go, and that's when Castroneves used it. And every time he used his, Sato used his as well. But here was the thing. Sato had used too much of it early on in the race and actually ran out of it right there on the last turn coming to the checkered flag while Elliott Castroneves still had about 5 seconds left in the tank. So it's certainly a controversial system. I mean, some people hate it, some people love it. I sort of like it. It's a really nice device in a way. Some people think it's a gimmick, but I don't like what they're going to do for tomorrow's race. And what they're doing is that to avoid these, and I quote, push to defend moves, IndyCar is implementing a 5-second delay on the push to pass. So that means when you push it, it's going to take 5 seconds to kick in. And so now you're going to have to plan ahead of time, okay, when do I need this? Do I need it coming out of the corner? Do I need it to go in the middle of the corner? But what happens if it comes on at the wrong time and your car shoots forward and you end up spinning somebody out and IndyCar sees that as avoidable contact? That's going to really screw a lot of drivers up. And I'm sure that these guys have had tons of practice with practice number 1 and then the warm-up that they had earlier today, as well as in qualifying to figure this out. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys are going to work, and I have a feeling that probably we're going to see some avoidable contact penalties tomorrow.
And it's very interesting. It kind of, to relate it to NASCAR, it's almost the same idea as whenever you have the 2-car draft. The driver in the front has to literally slam the throttle to get max speed, whereas the guy behind, I'm going back to Days of Thunder terminology here, the guy behind can go the exact same speed but doesn't have to use as much throttle. Then whenever he wants to pass, he's got that extra momentum, in essence like the push-to-pass option, then suddenly he can shoot by, almost like a slingshot move. But I do like the push-to-pass option. I will say I don't like this idea of the 5-second delay because I think it's going to create, like you say, too much controversy. And if you hit it at the wrong time and that delay and that doesn't kick in when you want it to, it could mean chaos. From what you've read, and Rob, you can give us your take on this option as well. From what the drivers have said so far, are they complaining more about it, or are they just feel that it's an unknown factor at the moment?
You know what? I've been hearing a lot from the fan standpoint of this, and some people don't like it. A lot of people, think it's really great. But I think that drivers, seasoned vets like Dario Franchitti or even Scott Dixon or Tony Kanaan may not like this at all. Drivers like Simon Pagenaud, James Hinchcliffe, and Sato, who are just starting out in this series and are moving up and are up in the big leagues now, they probably will like it. But I think this brings a lot of negative feedback from the drivers, and I have a feeling that probably this is only going to stick around for one race. But we'll have to wait and see. If it works out fine, then that means Sonoma, Baltimore, and Auto Club Speedway will have that in effect. If it doesn't work out so well, then probably look for IndyCar to take away this feature and just go back to the regular push to pass feature.
Rob, what do you think?
Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the push to pass, and I am one of those that feels it's a gimmick, feels it's a bit contrived to have more passing. But I also feel that with this car, the GW12, the races earlier in the season on the road courses were just fine, if you ask me, without the push-to-pass button. I thought they were very competitive. the race at Barber Motorsports Park comes to mind. I mean, I don't understand why IndyCar felt the need to go back to the push-to-pass, and now hearing about this 5-second delay, that just kind of seems silly to me. For exactly what you said, Glenn, the delay could introduce some perils to the drivers as to when it's finally going to kick in. You know, like now I guess they would have to anticipate, I want to be using it here, so I have to push the button earlier, so now it'll kick in exactly where I want to use it, rather than pushing the button and then waiting for it to kick in, and it finally kicks in when you don't want to. But I just think that just kind of sounds silly to me. Personally, but like I said, personally, I'm not a big fan of the whole idea of the push-to-pass.
And I think that is probably something that a lot of fans are going to possibly get used to. I kind of understand the use of it, but it takes a lot away from the driver.
Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Good evening, race fans. Once again, it's another off week, at least for our radio show. We are back on the air tonight. It is Lugnuts and Horsepower. We have a lot to get into tonight after coming out of Indianapolis and heading to Pocono. Lots of big stories to go. I am your host tonight, Dustin Parks, here in a nice sunny Pennsylvania. Feels pretty good. Let me first say hello to my usual co-host, Rob Blount, who's in California, I believe. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, but I am on the exact opposite coast of California. I'm on Long Island.
Oh, really? Well, last time we were on the air, you were in California, so anything's possible. But also tonight, for his monthly dose of IndyCar action, we all know him on Twitter as GL2488. How about Glenn Locke back on the air? How you doing tonight, Glenn?
Oh, awesome. It's hot as hell right now in Riverside, California, but it's going to get cooler the next couple of days. Oh, it's going to be beautiful.
Absolutely. You can't complain about that. Cooler weather. We definitely have a lot to get into tonight. IndyCar, NHRA, obviously NASCAR. Lots to go in. So let's go ahead and do sort of the table of contents. We call it our racing roundup. Rob Blount, you have the floor.
All right. Well, to start us off, the IZOD IndyCar Series qualified for the, give me 1 second here, for the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio. Will Power won the pole. Dario Franchitti qualified second. Simon Pagenaud, Alex Tagliani got fifth and right out the top five. However, Tagliani will start 14th for a 10-spot grid penalty. Ilio Castroneves, qualified 13th, will also start 23rd for a grid penalty as well. Moving to NASCAR, the Sprint Cup Series qualified this morning for tomorrow's Pennsylvania 400 from Pocono Raceway. Juan Pablo Montoya won the pole. Denny Hamlin qualified second. Coleman on third. Casey came fourth. Marcus Ambrose ran at the top five. The NASCAR Nationwide Series races tonight at the Iowa Speedway in Newton, Iowa. Elliott Sadler won the pole for that. Darrell Wallace Jr., making, I believe, only his second career Nationwide Series start, will start second. Austin Dillon third. Jason Leffler fourth, and Justin Allgaier fifth. The Camping World Truck Series raced today already from Pocono Raceway. Joey Coulter got his first Truck Series win. James Buescher finished second. Nelson Piquet third. Matt Crafton fourth, and Denny Hamlin fifth. The NASCAR Well and Modified Tour was in action last night at Stafford Motor Speedway. Doug Covey got the win again. Jimmy Blewett finished second. Todd Zegedy third. Eric Beers fourth, and Ted Christopher finished sixth. Ryan Preece, who was attempting to run 5 races in 5 days, finished sixth last night at Stafford, and he is down in at Bowman Gray Stadium in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for tonight's Southern Modified Tour. Qualifying just ended there. Burt Myers won the pole for that race. George Brunholz was third, qualified second. Brown qualified third. Burt's brother Jason Myers qualified fourth, and
ability. I mean, they're relying on in essence, they're relying on extra horsepower to make a pass. I'd rather see the driver actually muscle his way and use his mind to make the pass. It's the same way in NASCAR. Use the draft to get sucked up to the guy, and then whenever you are ready to make that slingshot, duck down or duck high and make the pass the old-fashioned way. Use the muscle of the car. So I'm kind of on the fence with this. I like it in some sense. I don't like it in some sense. I think after seeing after Sunday's event and how the push-to-pass will work with the delay, I'll know my final determination. Right now, I'm going to say I'm on the fence because I don't want to say I like it because, yeah, it gives these guys more horsepower and more boost and more acceleration, and then I say I don't like it because now they have to time it a lot better. I'd rather personally see the guys use their cars and their mind and use the advantage that they have just without it. I mean, we're going to end up seeing what's going to happen. But, Glenn, what are you expecting tomorrow? Away from the push to pass, what are we going to expect at, Mid-Ohio this weekend, and who do you think is going to be the top dog in victory lane?
I think what we're going to expect at Mid-Ohio is going to be a lot of fighting for position. It's a very narrow track, and DZW-12s are a little bit skinnier than what the original cars were. I definitely see some passes being made. Some you may have to do a little bump and run, and others you may have to, do some skill. But I definitely feel like it's going to be a marathon for these guys. And the drivers that I see doing very well, Will Power and Dario Franchitti. Will Power has the pole, and I don't think he's ever won here at Mid-Ohio. Dario Franchitti and Scott Dixon have a stranglehold on this racetrack. Last year, it was Scott Dixon that won the race. But Dixon has been having trouble with mechanical stuff. His engines have not been good. So I don't know if Scott Dixon is going to be a factor. But definitely Will Power and Dario Franchitti. Another guy that I think is probably going to be good is somebody like rookie Simon Pagenaud. Pagenaud, this track kind of fits his driving style. He seems to like these really skinny tracks. And does very well. I mean, back at Long Beach, he almost won the thing, but had to come in for a splash of gas. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everybody is going to place, and also how this race is going to work. But I think also a underdog for this race could be Oriol Servia. Servia is going to start way in the back, but it seems that no matter how often you put Servia back there, he comes up and he'll either finish top 10, top 5, or he may even get a podium. So I'll be keeping my eye on Oriol Servia, Pagenaud, and the rest there to see what they can do from the back.
Very interesting. Rob, who do you think is going to win, or don't you really have a...
I mentioned Ryan Preece qualified 5th. The K&E Series was in action last night at Iowa. Corey LaJoie got the win. Kyle Larson finished 2nd. Sergio Pena 3rd. Chase Elliott 4th. And Brett Moffitt ran out of the top 5. Travis Pastrana ran that race as well, and he finished 6th. And that's about it. Formula One is off this weekend. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. In case anybody's wondering where Patti Rodisch is, our usual co-host to have our 4-team team tonight, she is out of power right now here in Chicago. She is trying to get on the air. A little bit of a tornado watch right now that she's going through. She did say to me on Twitter and on Facebook she will be on the air, as soon as she can. So we are going to get to her as soon as she is able to get back on here. But right now, let's also turn it over to our other guest co-host tonight, Glenn. Let's get us caught up on the IndyCar Series. Obviously, Mid-Ohio we have this weekend. But what's been going on since the last time you've been on the air with us?
Well, last time that I was on with you guys, they raced the Edmonton Indy to a stellar finish. Elliott Sadler and Takuma Sato battled it out and used their push to pass for the last 15 laps, and it was an epic battle between the Brazilian and the Japanese man. And Elliott Sadler, who was denied a win for blocking in 2010, I believe it was, came across our finish line in first and finally got a win in Edmonton. I mean, that was perhaps perhaps the best feel-good moment of the year. And plus, I've always said that Brazil produces drivers with the best smiles as well as with a lot of emotion, and you just really want to cry tears of joy with Elliott Sadler, because to finally win there and put aside, everybody's saying, oh, he almost had the win, but he was, black flag for blocking. That is certainly awesome. And of course, just recently we found out that Graham Rahal is not returning to the 38 car next year for for the Service Center Ganassi team, but he could probably take a sponsorship with him. You just mentioned it, but now we're here in Mid-Ohio. Mid-Ohio is a really interesting racetrack, and plus one of the oldest road courses on the circuit. And this should be a fun race on this very narrow and tricky track.
Absolutely. Mid-Ohio is a very difficult track. Now, for those of us that have not been familiar with IndyCar as much as you, me, Rob, and Patti, explain to everybody, because you mentioned that those two were using the push-to-pass option for the last 15 laps. And I guarantee you, I watched that race as well. What a stellar performance by both those guys, Castroneves and Sato, just unbelievable. And I love seeing Castroneves win. It reminds me whenever he won the Indy 500 after all of his craziness, whenever he was on Dancing with the Stars and the problems that he was having at home, to come back and win that race. That was the kind of emotion I remember. But explain to the listeners what exactly the push-to-pass option is